This is Rebwar Fatah, and I would like to provide my opinion and views on the State Department, the U.S. State Department briefing of the 8th October 2016, where the State Department provides perhaps the more comprehensive plan revealed so far on the war against ISIS or ISIL or Islamic State. In this plan, the State Department claims it's the most comprehensive plan and is to eliminate ISIS. They claim also a global coalition of 67 members have been put together in order to fight ISIS in the region where they are and also globally. It is important for all parties concerned to discuss this plan because it's going to impact not only the Middle East but also globally can be very effective because by its nature ISIS is not only a regional non-state actor, but it's a global actor, and that's important to be recognized. However, I believe even this known comprehensive plan is not without its issues and problems. It's not without its shortcomings. It's not without its long-term effect on the region. And all these must be debated and must be identified from an early stage. One of the issues that the State Department failed to report or to understand is that the Turks are not really interested in fighting the global insurgency as much as they are interested in the weakening or elimination of the Kurdish political entity, which is established in the northern and northeastern part of Syria. By stepping in, Ankara very in a clever way managed to stop the Kurds to join the east part of the administration to the west. This is a major step success for Turkey in order to eliminate the Kurdish political entity. Another part of the plan is that the Turks are going to move much deeper into Syrian land, and I don't think this will be without its problems because the Turks are an occupying force in a foreign country. They are not even Arabs, so this will impose without doubt further problems. Also, using the Kurds to attack or to recapture a city with majority Arabs is not really a very sound plan, as it creates further ethno-sectarian problems, and it's not without its further future problems facing social cohesion in the region. It seems to me that the plan failed to understand future problems, only focusing on now and what can it be done in order to eliminate ISIS.
And we know where that led to, so we have to stay ahead of this. Let me give just a brief update of the situation in Iraq and Syria and how we're working to really strangle what is left of their physical space. The number one on the map, I've discussed this for quite some time. This is the 98-kilometer strip of border that they controlled with Turkey. They no longer control that strip of border with Turkey. The Turks, obviously supporting a number of moderate Syrian opposition groups, moved into Jarablus about a month ago. We are on the ground and helping them, and they have pushed to the west and cleared off that entire zone. and those forces are now moving towards the strategically symbolic town of Dabiq. So in number 2, Raqqa. Raqqa remains their administrative capital. We're working very closely with our partners, Syrian Arabs and Kurds, to build the force to begin to move the push on Raqqa, and that is something that we want to do as soon as possible. We, of course, have people on the ground working that now every single day. Let me focus, though, on number 3, because this is Mosul. It took some time to get in place to talk about the actual liberation of Mosul. Mosul, of course, is where Daesh burst onto the international scene. It's where Baghdadi declared his phony caliphate. And we now have all the pieces in place to get Daesh out of Mosul. So I won't talk about the timing. I won't talk about the specifics of the overall plan. But I will just talk about the extensive amount of planning that has gone into this. My Deputy General Terry Wolf is here. He spent about 3.5 weeks in Iraq, over 100 different meetings, helping to coordinate and bring everybody together to do this. There are 4 dimensions of the Mosul plan. One, of course, is the political dimension of the disposition of forces. We have built a force of over 30,000 for this total operation. That includes Kurdish Peshmerga, it includes Iraqi security forces, their counterterrorism service forces, it includes local Nineveh tribal fighters. We hope to have about 14,000 of those, and of course local police. So getting all of these forces together and arranged and where they're going to go and what they're going to do takes an awful lot of work. We worked very hard and had very close cooperation with our partners in Erbil and the Kurdistan Regional Government and President Masoud Barzani and the government in Baghdad to agree on the overall disposition of forces, where everybody will go, what they will do. That is now all agreed. So that is a very good sign. And President Barzani's presence in Baghdad, which some of you may have covered last week, was quite significant. First time he visited Baghdad in some years, and much of it was focused on making sure we have the pieces in place for the Mosul military operation. So the political agreements for how that's going to go are in place.
It is also important to make some observations on Mr. Barzani's visit to Baghdad. Mr. Barzani's visit to Baghdad created some issues and also, of course, problems in the region. The first one is that Mr. Barzani hasn't been to Baghdad for over 3 years, and perhaps he visited Ankara and also European capitals more than Baghdad or even Erbil, his own regional capital. This is one problem. The other problem is Mr. Barzani for years have been campaigning and trying to convince the local Kurdish population that he is going to establish a Kurdish state, and he cut all his ties with Baghdad. Now he is forced to go to Baghdad, I guess by Americans, and talk to Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, deteriorated the political situation in Kurdistan, and also dissatisfaction of the Kurdish population. This has been seen, this visit to Baghdad has been seen as a major U-turn in Barzani's claim to establish a Kurdish state, and the population lost their faith in Mr. Barzani himself. On another front, probably, and perhaps most importantly, the visit of Mr. Barzani to Baghdad deteriorated political situation further because Mr. Barzani failed to incorporate one of the major Kurdish political forces known as Goran in his visit to Baghdad. And this, of course, is not without its problems. It's dividing the people of Kurdistan even further, and also Mr. Barzani failed to incorporate one of the smaller, nonetheless effective Islamic groups known as Komal in his visit to Baghdad. So it might be fine for Americans that now Barzani is under the command of the Iraqi Prime Minister, but this has created many issues in the region, and also it will reflect in the future. It is very difficult to capture or recapture Mosul if Mr. Barzani is not treated as the commander of the armed forces, and if he hasn't got the support of all the political forces in Kurdistan. There is also other problems, of course, and that is Mr. Barzani's term in the office as the president of Kurdistan ran out about 2 years ago, and the best description for his post would be self-imposed president of Kurdistan. When the Kurdish political forces about 2 years ago wanted to take the problem with administration into the parliament and solve the issues, Mr. Barzani, in order to open the debate in the parliament and encourage the democratic debate about the future of the region, he actually closed down the parliament and blocked the Goran parliamentarians to go to enter Erbil in order to take part in the meetings. There are many major political problems in the region, and the plan of recapturing Mosul based on a shaky political situation in Kurdistan and also shaky administrational ground of Kurdistan is really very questionable how effective that would be. I further observe, of course I understand, that the State Department don't have a future political solution for the region, and they admit that they don't know what would happen on the ground after recapturing the land that has been captured by ISIS. And of course it is vital from now to also focus, not ignore, a political situation of the region, which I can envisage it won't be an easy problem to solve.
The problem here is that if you try to resolve all of those issues, Daesh will remain in Mosul for the foreseeable future and perhaps forever. So,
at least the State Department has two fundamental principles in the war against ISIS.
Principles on this are very clear. All military activities in Iraq, this is a fundamental principle of ours, all military activities in Iraq have to be with the full consent and coordination of the government of Iraq. We do not do anything in Iraq as a coalition without the consent of the government of Iraq. A second fundamental principle of ours is the sovereignty of Iraq and the territorial integrity of Iraq. So those are fundamental principles of ours that we will adhere to. This deployment to Bashika happened a little over a year ago. Been through it some time before. There was either some miscommunication or something, but it did not have that consent of the government of Iraq that we would require before a military force comes into Iraq. That said, they have trained a number of local Nineveh fighters, and we are prepared to incorporate those fighters into the operation under the Iraqi command. The key principle when it comes to Mosul is there is one plan, there is one command. Any armed groups outside of that structure are going to be a very serious problem.